balance has to be paid within 10 days. Failure to pay, same basic idea. And then all the payment methods. So it can take you, it can take a couple of months to get a deed. So technically, you pay your money, you don't technically own the house yet. Technically, you don't own a property until a deed is created and it's given to you. Once it's given to you, you own it. But until they give it to you, you don't own it. But you've paid for it. So it kind of sucks because things could happen. I haven't heard of specific cases, but house could burn down. You know, it's going to take 2 months for you to have a deed in your hand. House burns down. So that's another thing to keep in mind. With some of these properties, especially tax properties where you can break into them, I would say the prudent, although technically illegal thing to do would be to break into it and secure the property yourself. You know, make sure that you preserve it, because otherwise you got a mess to deal with. You know what I mean? But the other thing that can prevent you from that, more so with a sheriff's sale, is it may not be vacant. So you buy a property, you know, they're not guaranteeing it's empty. So if it's somebody still there, you got to take the legal action to get them out. In Pennsylvania, it's called ejectment. It's kind of like an eviction, but for someone you don't have like a rental agreement with. Similar process basically for evicting, for ejecting them. The lawyer I use, Toronto, what they recommend, and I did this once because it's the only time it happened to me. I bought a property through the tax sale process at the very end. And I went there when I finally got the deed, and I was gonna break in, and I got open this back window. I poked my head in. I'm like, damn, it's way too clean in here. And I'm like, it just looked too good. It wasn't like it was nice, but I'm like, yeah, this looks too good. So I backed out of there and I went looking for neighbors, and I talked to a neighbor. I said, is anybody living in there? And they were like, oh yeah, he says he owns the property, but we know he doesn't. So I just waited. I came back a few times until I caught him there. And it was a guy, he had been squatting in there for about 7 years. Yeah, well, the story is he was originally a tenant of the prior owner. The prior owner lived next door, blew his brains out, leaving behind 197 cats. That's the way the story goes. Not in the house I bought, but in the building next door. After the guy died, well, obviously he didn't pay rent. I don't think anybody took control of the estate and ended up in the tax sale process, both of the properties. So I ended up with that one, and he's in there. So, you know, I talked with him. I explained the situation. The way Toronto has guided, you know, folks like me to deal with it is, step one, make them a tenant. So that way it's kind of clear why you're getting rid of them. So instead of them claiming that they have any sort of other interest, what you do is you give them a letter. You literally post it just like you would a notice to evict, and you say, hey, I am the new owner as of this date. I am charging you market rent of this amount as of this date, and if you don't pay it, we're going to foreclose. And that's kind of, and then you end up foreclosing them or not foreclosing, evicting. You end up evicting them for non-payment. So you make them your tenant because they're living in your property. You say, hey, I'm going to charge you $800 a month. Just make it a reasonable market rate amount. That way nobody can argue with it. Yeah. If you make it $10,000 a month, well, then they're going to say, well, that's not market rate. That's not reasonable. That's, you know, I would never pay that. Nobody would. But if you make it a market rate rent, and then when they don't pay you, if they pay you, great. You know, well, you can also non-renew them. They're month-to-month tenants, and then you can evict them for being a holdover tenant. But basically, you make them a tenant as step one, and then you can evict them as, you know, a later step. But
I don't need their signature.
No, no. I mean, technically, you don't need a written document to be a tenant. You can have a verbal agreement for a month-to-month tenancy. So, you know, you can rent me this place. We don't have to write anything down. So it's that sort of a thing. So they even Toronto even gave me like a form letter to use. So they recommend this, and they say they've had good success with it. So I think the keys is that, you know, it's market rate rent. You're giving them notice about it so that they can't say I didn't know. You're giving them notice. You're documenting it in the same way as you would an eviction. You're posting it. You're dating it. You're taking a picture of it on the door, or you're handing it to them and getting them to, sign saying they've received it. So they know about it. It's reasonable. You own the property. It's right. But in this case, that was more of a formality. So I dealt with him, just in a straightforward manner. So I talked to him about it. I said, I got to get you out of here. How much time do you need? He was like, I need this amount of time. I told him, I said, to protect my interests, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna post this notice, and this is what it means. If you don't follow through, then yeah, I will take and evict you. I'm making you my tenant, and I will evict you. It took him a little longer than he promised, but I saw that he was making an honest effort to get out, and I gave him a little more time. And he actually called me afterwards to thank me, because like when we got down towards the end, it was taking him more time. He was like, "Oh, well, I'll give you a key to the place." I'm like, "No." I said, "Don't give me a key. It is your possession until you're out, and then it's in my possession, because I don't want any accusation that, something is missing or anything else. I don't have access until you're done, so that way it's kind of a clean break." But I gave him the extra time, and he did leave, and he left the property in decent condition. I mean, it was full of stuff, some of it the prior owners, but otherwise he didn't do it.
Just a quick question.
Yep.
The notice that you posted, was it a post about like a notice of like a rent increase and a termination of lease?
No.
The point is, like, what if he ended up paying you every month $800?
If he paid me, I wouldn't care. But if he paid you, you just non-renew him then. I didn't have to do that, but that's I think the reasonable presumption is you're not giving them a year lease.
Right.
So if you're not giving a lease term, they're month to month.
But you would have to post a new notice for termination then if he was paying.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. If he was paying, what you do is you would give him a 30-day notice to quit.
Right.
So actually technically in Pennsylvania, he would be there less than a year under with your agreement. You only have to give him 15 days. So if a month-to-month tenant.
But it can't end on any day except for the first. Per Toronto.
Okay, I didn't know that. I haven't had that come up. Yeah. But you only have to give 15 days notice. So if they pay you on the 1st, on the the 14th or 15th of the month, you can give them their 15 days notice, and they'd have to be out by the 1st.
Don't try that with Haggerty. He hates the 15-day notice.
Yeah.
He said that's not reasonable for anybody.
I don't think it is either, and I wouldn't do that. But
right.
that's beside the point.
Yeah. So if you post a 30-day notice to quit on the 5th day of the month, say January 5th. You can't evict them February 5th. You have to wait until March 1st.
First day of the month.
Yeah.
Well,
I tried this 3 times already, and I just said, fuck it, I'll go in the court anyway. In front of Haggerty. Haggerty said, no, the statute is plain as day. It has to be on the 1st. And that was like 3 years ago, so I don't know if anything changed.
I'd have to read the statute because I honestly wouldn't believe him. Because magistrates, just in my experience, they're often not hyper technical about following the law.
Right.
So they're dealing with small cases, evictions, small claims, up to like 12 grand. I think that's the max. So they will substitute sometimes their sense of fairness rather than spending, 3 days researching a case that's over $2,000. You know what I mean? They know it's unlikely to get appealed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they spend a lot of time trying to settle it there. Like they won't, like if you're asking for X amount of money, he's like, all right, what's reasonable? What can you actually do? And it's always like they try to benefit both people by trying to accommodate the landlord.
Gotcha.
So you don't go there and say I want to sue you for $20,000, and that's judge is gonna be like, okay, I'll give you 20. No, it's like why and show receipts. Yeah, it's very, very detailed. Most of the time, I went to like 5 different judges, and every single one, they just try to keep the peace. Let's just try to get this moving along and get out of here. Yeah. They don't sit there with the rule book like one guy, Haggerty, does. He went on the computer. And I was there for like 2 hours, and he was there. Statue, this. Him and Kevin Walsh were going back and forth. Yeah, it was rough. But yeah, it's not scary. Like a lot of people are afraid to go in front of the judge. It's actually they teach you a lot there. So.
Yeah, it's not bad. The magistrate process is made to be for the average person. It's small place.
I had a quick question about the eviction thing. You said the lawyer recommended you just go ahead and make him a tenant. So is it his legal opinion that it's more in the time frame of your benefit to go ahead and do that versus the other route? Is that
I don't know that it's time frame. I'm guessing it makes it more cookie cutter. So I don't know what all of the reasons, like if you didn't make him a tenant, the process is different. It's called ejectment. And I don't know if there are reasons the occupier can use to stay longer. So you're arguing different details.
Well, is the ejectment something separate than a squatter situation? Or is that how you deal
That's
with
where
the
I
squatter
believe
situation,
ejectment
or-
is for anybody who's occupying a property that is not your tenant. So you don't have an agreement with this person, but they're in and you want to get them out.
That would be an eviction, right? You were
Well,
actually a
no.
landlord.
If they're a tenant, it's an eviction.
Right.
If they're not a
Ejectment.
tenant, I believe it's called ejectment. I believe that's the differentiation. So if you're trying to eject someone, the things you're bringing to court to say why you're going to get rid of them is different. So by making them a tenant, it's cookie cutter. You're walking in and say, oh, it's non-payment.
And I know the question was asked earlier about like, how do you get them to sign? And you said you don't have to. So how do they like?
Well, you
post it.
You post a notice, so you know. You basic.
tenant.
Well, the letter that Toronto has given me, basically, you're giving them a notice saying that you're making them your tenant. I bought the property on March 1st.
Would you have to have a name to put on that document, or I'm just curious? Like,
No,
they just
half
put
a
the-
dozen people squatting in the house.
Now that I
where do
believe
we
if
go
I remember the
with
formula,
that?
because I only did this once, you just put to the occupiers,
Okay.
it's basically whoever's there is now your tenant. It's kind of weird, and like I said, I never had to actually evict with it, so I can't quite speak to it. And I'd have to go back and look at the template they gave me, because like I said, only used it once. But if I remember right, it just was like, to the occupiers, I bought the property as of this date. I'm charging you X amount of rent. Market rate rent, yada yada. If you don't pay, yep,
This is all after you have the deed in your hand.
yes.
So, and you were saying that you should like look at the property before you even have the deed in your hand. So
Well,
like